Hello and welcome. In today's episode of Dr. Nora, and as part of my baby series of videos, I teach you guys how to sterilize your bottles. This is super important for those of you who are using formula or are express breastfeeding for your little ones to make sure that you keep their tummies nice and safe and healthy. Sterilization is so important. It's a way to get rid of any bacteria, any germs, so when you are feeding your little one their nutritious milk, they are healthy and they're kept healthy on the inside as well. I scoured the internet from top to bottom to find out what the best sterilizer was for me, and I hope that through my experiences I can guide you guys as to how to sterilize your bottles. After a lot of research, I ended up going for Dr. Brown Steriliser. Now the reason I like this is because it had two modalities. One, it had the option of just sterilizing your equipment, and two, it also had the option of sterilizing and drying at the same time. But not only this, the package that I happened to buy happened to also include a bottle warmer as well, which was super important because once you've thawed your breast milk or your formula, for example, how do you heat it up? Now I'll take you through how I sterilize my bottles, but it's also really important that when you are pre-washing your bottles to make sure that you use a pH neutral washing liquid. Now this can't be your usual Fairy, for example, because it's just too strong, it's too fragrant. And the one that I use is called Milton, and it's specifically for washing off baby products. So it's really important to make sure that you look for a pH neutral washing liquid. Once you've got that, it's also important to gather your apparatus because you're going to need a bottle washer. Now this really helps to get into those nooks and crannies of your bottles, of your teats, of all of your apparatus for your bottles. Once you've washed your bottles in your warm soapy water and you've thoroughly rinsed them because you don't want any soapy residue on your bottles, you then place them into your sterilizer. Now, for myself, I always make sure that the sterilizer is evenly spaced out and nothing is too clogged in. This allows for the heated water to pass through all of my components and then for the air to dry it thoroughly as well. Now, for Dr. Brown Steriliser, it does take up to 45 minutes to do this whole process. If you just want to opt for sterilizing your bottles without drying them, that process takes approximately 9 minutes. But if you want to dry them as well at the end of it, it takes 45 minutes in total. For me personally, I actually quite like using the drying function of the sterilizer because it just gives a nice cleaner look for the bottles themselves. The Dr. Brown Steriliser does use distilled water, and essentially the reason this is because if you use regular water, which you can, but it might shorten the length of the heating plate at the bottom of the sterilizer. I always get some distilled water from my local shop, about 5 litres worth, and it uses about 110 mils of water into the heating plate, and voila, the job is done. So it's pretty easy to set up and it's very simple to use. Now, something that I think is so important if you are going down the sterilizing route, when I was expecting and I didn't know anything about sterilizing bottles, I just thought, well, you sterilize it once, one and done. However, I was so wrong. It is not one and done. You have to sterilize your bottles every 24 hours. So that means that if you haven't used those bottles within 24-hour period, you have to re-sterilize them again. So you go through the process of washing them and re-sterilizing to make sure there's no bacteria in those bottles. And the best way to keep your bottles nice and sterilized is to keep them within your container, which is your sterilizing machine, for the duration of the 24 hours to make sure it's got optimum amount of sterilization. If you put them outside on the counter, there's no way of knowing if there's any bacteria that creeps inside them or if someone's walking by and sneezed over them. You just simply don't know. So for me personally, I always keep my bottles when they're sterilized within the container. And the great thing about my container is that it has got vents, so that there is some breathing action that can go on, there's some airflow going through. But as long as I use them within the 24 hours, then I'm safe. If, however, it spills over and I don't need to use them in that particular time, then I'll just rewash them again and re-sterilize them. So I saw quite a few TikToks out there for some new mums who were sterilizing all of their bottles in advance for their baby coming in 2 months' time. Mums, unfortunately, the sterilization does not last for that long. It does only last for 24 hours. So you're going to have to re-sterilize them again prior to your baby coming. Great for you for practicing, but please make sure that you do re-sterilize your bottles regularly and wash them with warm soapy water to keep your little ones nice and protected. Now, I just wanted to share with you guys some situations whereby you might not have access to your sterilizing machine, and what do you do in that situation? So if you don't want to choose a sterilizing machine, you can just boil your products in hot water. So what you need to do in those situations is, again, you would wash out all of your bottles with your pH neutral washing up liquid, and you rinse them out really thoroughly, and you place them into a pan of hot water or a saucepan of hot water, and you leave them to boil for 10 minutes. Once the 10 minutes is up, then you can keep them out to dry, and then you can use them as sterilized as if you had a sterilizing machine. Now, I have done this myself and I've used it for situations where I've had to sterilize other products that just haven't simply fit in my sterilizing machine, and so far everything has been fine. It just takes a little bit longer which is bizarre because 10 minutes doesn't take as long, but it takes a little bit longer for me personally because I have to be constantly watching the pot of water, and it takes a little bit more manpower. But if that's where you want to go, then go for it. There is nothing wrong with just boiling your counterparts and using them later on. So I hope you guys have found that video really useful, and if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to drop me a line in the comment section below. But for now, take care and stay healthy.